I don't take you, because I've seen interviews with you, as an over serious person, but I would just say you're someone who sees things clearly for the seriousness of the moment. And I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that if you and I had been having this conversation um, in a cafe in Berlin in 1933, we would have been discussing much the same topics, whether it's
Mm.
kindness and cruelty or the despotism on the horizon. I'm very troubled by the fact that there are a lot
Combined
of,
with the indifference that exists
yeah, the whole
among
bit.
the populace in far too great quantity.
Yeah, and this weird symbiotic relationship between our tech bros and a certain billionaire class, a kind of libertarian individualism that plays into Donald Trump's, I mean, I'm not going to call them strengths, but who he is.
Right.
There's so many similarities between that era and our own that, I take it as a big warning on the wall, as it were. Let's start just by talking about right now with what has happened with Donald Trump reemerging in my neck of the woods
Mm.
that I come from, as someone who is got the vote sewed up, it appears, of about 70% of people who identify themselves as evangelicals. And of that 70%, and we can talk about this now, polls and studies are beginning to show that a lot of these people aren't church going evangelicals. They're simply using the label as shorthand for right wing MAGA. That's how far it's gone. I come from that background. In the 70s and 80s, my father was very influential in those circles, and I have since left that. But I don't think most people, looking for a way to start our conversation, understand the radical shift from the religious right in which Dad and I and people like us were outsiders in
Mm.
the day, knocking on the door of Ronald Reagan and the Bush family. And my parents used to stay in the Ford White House because we were friends with that family. But nevertheless, we were outside agitators. We weren't in the Oval Office with our hands on the president's shoulder getting our pictures taken, nor were we nor were one of us radical Reconstructionist evangelical Christians, the Speaker of the House, where Mike Johnson is right now. So
Right.
just start there in
Huh.
the shift of evangelicals to not only the inside track, but the total takeover of the Republican Party with our litmus test. And then the devolution of the evangelical movement into a Trump cult, which is now the
Yeah.
spearhead of American fascism. And it's
Yeah.
really, I'm 71. I've seen it. I was a fly on the wall through the whole thing. We were part of this. I still don't, I'm still not able to process it because it's
Yeah.
so far from anything I could have imagined 30 years ago.
Well, that's a lot. I would say to you that the desire for power within the Christian evangelical movement has been something going on for decades. We
Mm,
can go back to somebody like Jerry Falwell
sure.
as an exemplar of that desire. But I think what Trump has succeeded in doing is tapping into the sense of grievance, and I think maybe more than anything else, this idea of persecution,
Mm,
political, in his case, so-called political persecution. There's nobody who presents himself as more victimized and persecuted,
mm,
and uses every legitimate effort of the court systems or the judicial department to uh, uh, pursue the application of the rule of law.
mm,
But then it gets sort of twisted and turned around as an act of persecution against him. And the tradition, and I've talked to people who are far more knowledgeable about sort of the history of Christian
sure.
evangelicalism, who will talk about, going back a very long time, this
Mm,
history of being a persecuted population within the larger whole. And it's a for many of us, it's a funny thing, sort of given how much, in fact, position and power and presence that white Christians, in fact, do have in
yeah.
America. But somehow he's succeeded at sort of tapping into that mentality, and that seems to lead to strip away all the other things, all the immorality and amorality that
Mm,
defines who he is. We can, spend the hour making a list of
sure.
all those elements. But if you take the the exit polls from New Hampshire, I think there was in excess of 70% support for Trump from the evangelicals in New Hampshire. And we're going to see that for sure around the country. I mean, in the New Hampshire primary, you had 70 of the Republicans, self-identified Republicans, you had 75% who said that, actually, 74% who said that they supported Trump. Right, 25% who supported Haley, and if you look at, and I sort of paid attention to the exit polls, among those who supported Trump, they defined the economy. I'm going to give you a percentage. They defined the economy. 89% said the economy is poor among those who voted for Trump. 80% who were voting for Trump said they were angry about the direction of the country. Let's just sort of use those two bullet points as an example. Yep. Angry, sense of the country's going in the wrong direction, a sense of grievance, that's what he's tapped into. And it's, if you flip it around, for me, it's quite fascinating that what you saw from the voters for Haley, I think they're kind of a stand-in for Biden, really, because, and a lot of them are, in fact, sort of Democrats or independents, who voted in the Republican primary. But, 81% that said economic conditions are good. 76% said they were satisfied about the way things are going in the country. Right. That doesn't sound like, a Republican or surely a member of the Trump cult.